Well, anyway, today we're going to talk about action figures. It's really more of history and technological advancements. They're not like the toys that you used to have growing up, I assume, unless you are very, very young. But that's none of you in here. So here we go. These are some of my photos right here. So there we go. That's the introduction. I did want to say that it's going to be a very broad overview. Very, very broad. Not really any dates or people's names. There's too much to cover in 20 minutes. And when I say broad, I'm talking broad like The Rock's shoulders. Like very, very broad. Very, very muscular because they're action figures. Anyway, this is me. I'm Eric Antonowicz. I've been collecting action figures for over 20 years, since I was little. I'm an award-winning toy photographer. I've won Mezco Toys' 112-day contest last year, which doesn't mean anything to any of you, I imagine, but it's pretty cool. I have a radio, television, film degree from UT, and all I do with it are take these pictures. Also, I have a mustache. I'm sure you were at home thinking, man, I'm going to go to a lecture about toys. I bet this guy has a mustache. And you'd be correct. Also, this is kind of meta. This camera is actually a transformer. So it's a toy. It's very silly. So let's define our terms. What makes an action figure an action figure? It's different from any other toy. How is that? Well, let's see. Let's go over what's the difference between a doll and an action figure. Those would be the two things that we tend to conflate with each other. And the difference is, it turns out, not much. It's who it is marketed to. Round about the 60s, toy companies were thinking, how am I going to sell dolls to boys? The way that you do it is you trade dresses for fatigues and kitchen equipment for guns. And you market them to boys by coming up with a new name called action figures. And that's what we have here. We have G.I. Joe and Barbie. Same thing, just for different audiences. Anyway, G.I. Joe, when launched, the first official action figure. Oh, and there's Channing Tatum and Margot Robbie, just modern examples. He comes in what's called 1/6 scale. So most people, heroic people, action people, are 6 foot or 6 foot something. I don't have an action figure, obviously, and so. What happens with scaling is if you take the action figure and you stack 6 of them on top of each other, that's the size of the person, 1/6 scale. And that's kind of roughly what happens for a while. You get things like Action Man and all kinds of weird stuff from Japan, and it's all generally about that size. And then what happens, and this also happens with Transformers, but we're not going to get into Transformers very much because that's like a whole nother thing, is G.I. Joe rebrands. And they base, instead of just generic soldiers, they come up with a storyline and characters and a multimedia franchise where you have comic books and you have movies and TV shows, cartoons, all based on a toy. The toy comes first and the idea comes later. And what they did is they came up with a new scale for toys. There was an executive and they were asking him, what size do you want these toys to be? We're coming up with something new. And he puts out his fingers, and he goes about like that. And that was 3 3/4 inches, which is approximately 1/18 scale. So they're like this big. And that becomes the kind of the format for the 80s toys. And it should be noted that the movies and the shows and all that are typically really bad. Nostalgia might be telling you, oh, I loved the G.I. Joe cartoon, and oh, the Transformers cartoon was wonderful. It's not. Go back and watch it. If you're arguing with me, go back and watch it, and you'll be embarrassed because it's horrible. It's an ad for toys and not a good one at that. Anyway, these toys were typically about that same scale and they would have limited articulation, articulation being the ability of the figure to pose and move. So, you could move him at the neck and the arms and the legs, but not really the knees or anything in there. Their target audience was, of course, children who would play with them. You know, you go and smash them together and you make your sound effects. And they would often have little action features that sort of act as evidence of them being for children and for playing. This one is not from the 80s, but it has the same illustrating point. He can move like that. Swings his little axe, so you swing it into the other toy. So it's a lot of fun for kids to play with. And they stick with the 3 3/4 inch mostly. Again, very, very broad, you know, big shoulders, the whole thing. We went over that. And then, when I was little, you had the birth of a more modern action figure that really starts, at least for me, and again, very broad. There's other things that happen that I'm not covering. With the Spider-Man classics, this is one in particular toy I got off the shelf when I was young. They have super articulation. So instead of 5 points where you can do this, you have 30 points. This one has 30 points of articulation. It can really pose and be used to recreate some of those classic, you know, Spider-Man poses. He does a lot of interesting posing. And they move the scale to 1/12 scale. So every inch of toy is a foot of person. So if you stack 12 of them together, you get the whole size person. And then they come out with Marvel Legends, which is just, it perfects the formula. It gives you a larger roster of characters. This is Wave 1. And they go deeper. They're packaged with a comic book. They're incredibly popular to this day. If you go down the toy aisle at Target or Walmart or even Walgreens, you will find Marvel Legends, and you will find a lot of them if they keep up with their stocking. There are thousands of figures in the line. And speaking, I was talking about articulation. One of the things that's really great is they include something called an ab crunch. So you can see how these guys are bent over, and the ability to do that really opens up posing possibilities because you can't really do a lot of things like tie your shoes if you can't bend over. Then we also have the inclusion of double-jointed elbows. Before this, most elbows on an action figure would bend to about 90 degrees, something like that. And you can't even, you know, touch your chin. You can't do anything like that until they divide the joint into 2 pieces, there, and that allows for a fuller range of motion. They also came up with the concept of a Build-A-Figure, which is it's kind of a marketing strategy. So they come out in waves, right? So these 5 characters came out at the same time, and you could go to the store and you could buy them. It's really great for someone who was already going to buy all of these characters. They get a full, giant, extra action figure for no extra cost. But say if you were looking to buy only some of them, and say you didn't want to buy this guy, the Wendigo, you didn't want to buy him, but you still wanted the big figure that and the piece, the arm, comes with the Wendigo, you'd have to buy it anyway. So it's sort of forcing you into purchasing things that you don't really want to. That's one of the reasons I don't really mess with them anymore. And then we're going to talk about face printing technology, which is a new thing, pretty new in the past few years. So here you would have, and these, okay, by the way, if anybody knows about toys, they're going to be miffed that these are 2 different companies and 2 different lines of toys and 2 different price points. I'm just illustrating the difference in quality. So here you have a Marvel Legends. That's Robert Downey Jr. You can sort of tell it's supposed to be Iron Man. He has the goatee, and he's got his hair all pointy. But if you look over here at this one with the laser face printing technology, that's Robert Downey Jr. And I have one of those in here. Proof of concept, there he is. There's the little guy. He's adorable. So really, that kind of revolutionized things for me, and that what got me, one of the things that got me collecting a little more heavily and investing in a little more expensive toys because of the quality there. And then, recently, with this new face printing technology, Hasbro created what's called the Selfie Series. So this is a thing where you can go and do this at home, or after we're done speaking. You can download the Hasbro Pulse app, you can scan your face, and then you can get an action figure with your own face on it. That's very cool, right? I want that. It seems cool, but I've scanned my face many times, and it does not come out as nicely as these do. I look really weird. I have body image issues now because of the selfie series. It does not look as good as they advertise. Another thing is the hands. This is a big point. If you think about it, it's very important, but if you're not really thinking about using toys, you might not come across it. But what they had, sometimes you'd have a static hand where you get your little toy and he's just got a fist, or he's just got a curved hand for holding his sword or axe or whatever. But then they came up with articulated fingers like these here, where they're joints and they move. The problem is they're so loose, if they try to hold something, it's just going to fall right out because they can't grip very well. They're also awkward. You can't get them into any pose, like moving these fingers around. You can't really make any pose other than a fist because no one's walking around like this fighting the bad guys. It doesn't make any sense. They came up with interchangeable hands where a figure is packaged with multiple hands. You get a variety of different options for the poses and get the fingers. They're very solid and secure. They can hold items. You'll have hands designed for holding specific items, and so that comes in handy in my photography, or if you're playing with them, I suppose that would be useful. I don't do that anymore. I'm a man now. But these are very good. And then, speaking of which, there's a new audience. This is me pushing my toy in a swing. There's a new audience. The new term that's been bandied about is kidults. I hate it. It's demeaning, but it is accurate. Adults make up 1/4 of all toy sales. That is a figure that came out this year. It's a new emerging market. People like me who just like toys and are technically adults. And then there's a new thing. We'll see more of my photos later. But toy photography is a new hobby because I was collecting action figures for basically forever. And then I was like, why am I doing this? I don't play with them anymore. They just sit there. But then I found something to do with them, which is take pictures. There's a whole new market of third-party accessories, and like, let's say you have your John Wick action figure, and you think, this doesn't really look like Keanu Reeves. I want a new head on this toy. You go on Instagram, and there's somebody selling Keanu Reeves heads, specifically designed to fit your toy. So there's a whole market out there, 3D printed weapons, all kinds of things for just real big nerds. And there's also, they produce sets, little play sets that are designed just for photos. There's a company called Extreme Sets, which we'll look at some of their stuff later, where they basically make cardboard modular sets, which sounds like it looks terrible, but in photos, it's really no problem. And what's the real positive about this new audience, me, is that price is no object to a degree. My wife's over there, I gotta say that. But an adult can spend a lot more money on their hobbies because they don't have to check with anyone except for her. And here's a little proof of the new audience coming into play. Oh no, I covered the D. That's classified. But anyway, the first wave of figures, they were really brightly colorful, you can see. Imaginary weapons. This is not anything based in reality. The brightly colored gold shin guards for whatever reason, because this was originally, they thought they'd market a cartoon from the 80s to modern children, and later on, after getting feedback, the later waves became much more realistic, muted colors, militaristic, realistic weapons. I don't know all the names of them, but that's a gun that exists. And so you can see that they definitely adjusted, they pivoted to the new market, which are adults. And, you know, we're just going to take a little side step here to sexism in the toy industry. It's everywhere else. Why wouldn't it be here? So what was prevalent for a long time were single-jointed elbows, even in these modern action figures, but basically only for female figures, because the prevailing theory is that they didn't sell as well, and they didn't want to put the money into developing them and to the production to use the double-jointed elbows, which are just better. And so they're more cheaply made and of lower quality for budgetary reasons. But good news, at least in Marvel Legends, there has been a recent change where they have been including the double-jointed elbows, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is. It's showing respect for their audience and respect for women. It only took them 20 years. Anyway, now we're going to talk about my favorite toy company. This is a modern for adults toy company. You would not give these to your children. They have what's called soft goods. Their outfits are made of real cloth. I'll pull one out in a second. They have many, many accessories that are really, really specific to the character. This is John Constantine, and you can tell he's smoking a cigarette with smoke coming off. You're not going to sell that to children these days. They're highly detailed. They are very, very expensive. Again, sorry, honey. It's a lot of money. This one here is about $100, so that's quite the investment. We're going to just not talk about that very much. And their capes and their coats have little wires embedded in them, so you can pose them like it's flowing in the wind. Here is that Constantine with his cape, or that's a coat, whatever. And you can see that it bends, so he's blowing in the wind. It's really great. A very interesting technology getting the cigarettes in. His face is really soft, so you just kind of pull on his chin and like shove it in. And I've never seen that before. That was pretty cool. And then anyway, so we can do Q&A. My Instagram is at halfnerd, with underscores between each word. And there it is. And these are some of my photos here. This is an extreme set I was talking about, made of cardboard. So it just looks like they're at a bar, a crowded bar, and having dinner, but that's all cardboard back there. And that's another one of those G.I. Joes and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, how do we transition to Q&A, do you?
Wow, that is so cool. Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, we are going to do Q&A. And you have to talk into the microphone because otherwise you won't be recorded or broadcast through Twitch. And I see this hand first. One question.
Yeah, so one of the sets of action figures which I was expecting to see, but I didn't see you mention at all, was the Star Wars line, which predates the G.I. Joe, etc. Have they fallen behind the times in technology, or where do they fit in the overall realm of collectible action figures?
That is a very good point. I just didn't have room for it. But honestly, they pretty much, I mean, they start out a similar size and everything, but Marvel Legends, there's basically Star Wars The Black Series, which is the Marvel Legends of Star Wars, from the same company, from Hasbro. So you can actually go, again, into Walmart, Target, anywhere, and you'll see those there. If you're interested in Star Wars toys, they're out there, and they're just as available. I didn't even include Todd McFarlane and a lot of things like that because there's just so much. But yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah. Besides the injection molding and the 3D printing, what other technologies are they using, such as the soft action figures? What are they using to do those?
For Constantine's face, I think that's more of it's just a soft plastic. I wouldn't know the exact type that it is. But along those same lines, one of the things that they're doing is they're trying to come up with a seamless body where the joints are all covered by, because you can see the lines on the body where they move, where the joints are. They're all covered by more of like a soft rubberized plastic that bends and moves with them. So far, it doesn't work when you do the whole body, but they do a lot of it with torsos, and so you'll cover ab movement and the necks and stuff, but that's like the next frontier right there.
Okay, next question. Where are we? Yes.
Hey, I have a question. For which toys do you decide to buy? Do you have a method for which toys you want to go with? Is it just which interests you, or is there like a weird method to filling out your collection or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, mostly stuff that I'm interested in. I have little, like, sections of the collection, like DC Universe figures, Marvel figures, monsters, and the like. But yeah, I try to get things that are really unique and interesting, and that I can afford.
All right. Another question? Yes, Amy.
So out of the female action figures that you've collected, which one is like the best made, best kitted out, most authentic appearance? Or is there a single one, or is there a line?
Thank you. That's a good question. She's not on here. That one's really good. That's a Mezco Wonder Woman, but it's also very expensive. But it's very interesting because it's the one that I would say that comes to mind that's the best. Just the face looks the most like the person. It's you ever seen Avengers: Infinity War? You know Black Widow's look with the blonde hair and the vest and all that? That figure looks exactly like her. It comes with everything you'd want except for guns, but she doesn't use guns in the movie, so that's fine. But I would say the SH Figure Arts Infinity War Black Widow is probably the best one I have. Thank you.
All right, one more question. Who's got our right back?
My question is, would you consider, like you had the differential between dolls and action figures, things like the cause, action figures are more collectibles?
Thank you. Well, just speaking personally, I don't like the term collectible because you can collect anything. You can collect stamps, bottle caps, coins. So what they are action figures to me. When I refer to them personally, I just call them toys. Like, oh, I got to go grab some of my toys to do this. My wife calls them characters. It's funny. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the difference, I think a lot of people try to define collectible as something that's geared towards like an adult audience. Like the Mezco ones I was talking about, like if you're going to call any of them collectibles, it's definitely those because they're so high-end. But for me, I mean, an action figure is an action figure, whether you get it at Walmart or you get it from a specialty site. It all's the same to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks so much.